Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to the Paris Defense and Security Forum and to this keynote about tomorrow's technology challenges and Europe's position in digital sovereignty. I am Vincent Gille. I am a researcher at IHEDN's chair about digital sovereignty and cybersecurity. And the chair is a member of the Academ Network who is organizing this event. To explore this subject, I have with me Major General Dominique Luzeaux. Welcome. So you were director of the Digital Defense Agency within the French Ministry of Defense, and in 2023 you became Digital Transformation Champion and Special Advisor to Supreme Allied Commander inside NATO's Allied Command Transformation. We also have Dr. Daniel Gille. Welcome. You work at the Cyber Agentur since 2021, and you are now Department Head of Key Technologies. So we are in a period of intense geopolitical changes and rapid technological changes. In such a period, a lot of people are looking towards Europe capabilities and defense abilities. Major General Luzeaux, on this subject, what is Europe's technological position today?
Well, first, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, industry leaders, innovators, and partners in our defense ecosystem. It's an honor to address here the architects of our global security, policymakers, strategies commanders, and innovators who turn ideas into capabilities that protect our citizens and advance our deterrence and defense. So we gather at a very decisive moment in history. The geopolitical landscape is evolving faster than at any time in the last 3 decades. Geopolitical shifts, emerging threats, emerging technologies, and demand that we innovate faster, that we collaborate smarter, and that we lead boldly. In the defense sector, technological excellence is the lifeblood of strategic autonomy. It's no longer a luxury. Actually, it's the very currency of power. Notice that I didn't use the word sovereignty. I used the word strategic autonomy because sovereignty is a very contentious issue stemming from the diverse historical experience of our different nations. Strategic autonomy or capacity for perception, decision, and action seems to me a better word. This is all the more critical for digital technologies and cyberspace, whose borderless nature challenges strict geographical control. Actually, this is not restricted to digital issues because if you look at supply chains, from raw materials to products and systems, they are also very global. Each country must now face and ask themselves a simple but profound question. Will we continue to be dependent consumers of critical technologies? Or will we become independent creators of the technologies that define our security and our freedom? This is the challenge we face, and this is our shared mission. Excuse me. France, like many European countries, faces 4 technological challenges. First challenge is external dependency in defense technologies. Too many of our critical defense systems actually rely on foreign components, from microelectronics critical for weapon systems to secure communications, from AI processors to AI-enabled platforms for battlefield autonomy. National capabilities remain tied to non-national providers. And dependency is a strategic vulnerability, and the industrial sector has a pivotal role in reversing this trend. We cannot pursue and guarantee the integrity of our systems if we do not control the technologies that power them. The second challenge is actually a rapid technology disruption. There are breakthrough innovations we see every day and which shape the battlefield, like artificial intelligence for decision support and autonomous systems, like quantum technologies for secure communications and also sensing, hypersonic platforms, next-generation space and ISR capabilities. All these technologies are redefining the way wars are fought and deterrence is postured. And industry today, back to your question, is the engine for turning research into operational capability. we must not just adopt these technologies, we must develop them ourselves in France, in Europe. And if we do not master these technologies, others will define the rules and the standards. The third challenge we face is fragmentation and slow procurement. European defense remains fragmented. Multiple national programs duplicated our research and development, inconsistent standards, slow innovation. Let me use an analogy with the stick and bundle metaphor. If you take just a single stick, it's easily broken. But if you put several sticks together in a bundle, it's almost unbreakable. And this emphasizes the fact that collective unity is essential for survival. By harmonizing procurement and by aligning priorities, we need both, we can accelerate development, we can reduce costs, and we can increase competitiveness globally. And the final challenge actually is, and this will be developed by Daniel, the final challenge is evolving cyber and digital threats. Cyber attacks are becoming more and more common. They have become the leading vector for hybrid conflict, as we see in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Critical infrastructure, power grids, data centers, logistics networks, military command and control systems are now targets for state and non-state actors alike through kinetic and also non-kinetic attacks. We need end-to-end digital resilience, not patchwork defenses, and this is really a challenge for every individual country, but this needs also a broader approach because all these networks are connected and each interconnection is a vulnerability point. And this contributes to ripple effects. So this is what I wanted to first to say on the role of technology in innovation and the role of industry.
Thank you, Major General, for addressing the main challenges. Dr. Daniel Gille, what about the threats? How could we identify and predict the future threats in the cyber domain? And actually, what are the current threats that we are facing today?
Well, first of all, let me thank you very much for being part of PDSF and sharing the vision of and mission of Cyberagentur. Here, as you might know or maybe might not know, we, Cyberagentur, are a 100% state-owned agency in Germany that is dedicated to funding and catalyzing potentially groundbreaking research in the area of cybersecurity, especially for defense and for interior security. So looking into the future is in our very DNA, I would say, and of course it is terribly difficult also for us because it is shrouded in mystery, and we have developed, since we were created back in 2020, a distinct set of different tools in order to take a quick glance at the future, what might or might not lie ahead of us, in order to determine which kinds of programs we actually want to fund and want to heavily invest. So basically, one of the main tools that we've developed is data science projects in order to analyze large publication data sets, because what we've found is that it's quite interesting to look at the patterns of scientific publications in very specific technology fields. If you see, for example, like a linear increase in a certain part of, I don't know, quantum sensing or whatever, and then all of a sudden the number of releases drop, maybe to zero even, then you have to ask yourself the question, was the technology not sufficiently efficient, or maybe there was a breakthrough and every subsequent release was classified, or something happened at this point, so maybe it's worth to further investigate. A second tool we regularly use is to take a closer look at the composition of national tech ecosystems. So we are creating sort of startup landscapes in order to see where are the specific strengths of different countries and where are there maybe complementarities. Because as Austrian President van der Bellen once said, there are only two types of countries in Europe, those that are small in global terms and those that haven't realized it yet. So not a single European country is probably able to excel in all kinds of technological fields, which means we therefore have to be more invested in mapping out the strengths and the weaknesses and see where there are overlaps, where we can create synergies, but also where we have complementarities and can basically help each other. The third tool we are regularly using is we are carrying out workshops with our stakeholders at the Bundeswehr, at police organizations, etc., but also with potential contractors in order to find out what are the future technologies that are ahead, what are the main threats. So we organize topics-related workshops on tech foresight, on scenario analysis in order to see how might different paths develop in the future and what are likely impacts on the different organizations that we actually try to help by giving major advantage in basic research. And lastly, and from my perspective, because I come from the research and innovation department, the most important part is we are almost on a daily basis in constant exchange with researchers in some very broad, but also in some very obscure research fields in order to detect weak signals, in order to see what might lie ahead of us, and to determine the scope of our research projects and encourage them also, of course, to work with us in the future when we are funding a new research project. So these are basically the four components that feed into our crystal ball in order to determine what kinds of cyber threats lie ahead of us. So you might also now ask yourself, well, that sounds very nice, but what are the actual cyber threats that we see looming on the horizon and maybe becoming very relevant in the years ahead? So I'd like to highlight maybe 3 or 4 different cyber threats that we are seeing. For example, in my department, Key Technologies, we are currently working very intensively on creating mitigation mechanisms for data-based AI systems, because just it's in the very nature that they can be deceived. There can be some sort of evasion attacks, model stealing, data poisoning, which is highly critical if AI mechanisms are deployed, for example, in a defense context. So this is a very high priority. Also, how can we deal with foundation models, with large language models, vision language models that do not originate from the European Union, but from America or from China, but that have really high performance? How can we deal with these models, and how can we apply them in a safe and secure manner? For example, by looking really deep into them, drilling into them, and developing new sorts of holistic benchmarking mechanisms in order to see how they really behave. But we also are dealing with potential new threats, such as side channel attacks on post-quantum cryptography. So the next generation of cryptography might even now be subject to different threat vectors. We are dealing with making autonomous vehicles, like drones, for example, more resilient by applying swarm-based approaches. So, let them collaborate and make them more secure in this approach. But also, we have other departments that deal with really huge challenges and huge threat vectors like cybercrime at scale, like hybrid automated attacks, for example, on critical infrastructures, disinformation, and deepfakes. As a matter of fact, there's right now is a workshop in another room here by some of my colleagues who are trying to determine what are new potential threats like deepfakes for virtual realities. So I think it's also a really, really interesting topic. But please stay here with us.
Thank you for sharing on the analysis of the current and future threats. Major General Luzeaux, the link between a country's military sector and its industry has always been essential. How is this link evolving through the current technological landscape?
So, as I said, industry is pivotal to turn operational requirements into delivered capabilities. And to make it even more efficient in our current evolving landscape, actually, we must build a strategic posture rooted in 3 pillars. So the first pillar, of course, is innovation at scale. We must invest in homegrown research and development from ideation to deployment with sustained multi-year funding commitments. Continuity is very important. We must nurture innovation ecosystems that connect universities, defense industry, startups, national research centers, in order to shorten innovation cycles and adopt agile development models. Just to give you an idea, from the lessons learned, this is unclassified, from the lessons learned we have from the Russian-Ukraine crisis, conflict, war, You can name it as you wish. The innovation cycle actually is 6 weeks. So it's not a few years, it's 6 weeks. And of course, the adversary has another innovation cycle of 6 weeks. So it's really acceleration of innovation cycles we have to work on. Programs like, and this we can do actually, we are able to do collectively things, but we have to understand that time now is the essence. We must accelerate. I would say this is one of the keywords, the first keyword. Second pillar is strategic collaboration across borders and sectors. No single nation, country can innovate alone in all domains. Strategic technologies require shared vision and shared resources. We are strongest when we operate as a network, when we build shared technology platforms for interoperability, which is key for for the alliance, of course, but also for allied military operations. We are strongest when we allow joint procurement and joint development of critical technologies, when we develop public-private relationships, partnerships to leverage innovation at scale, and when, of course, we reduce duplication and cost. Consider the power of scaling. If we put together, if we pool research and development, we are able to shorten innovation cycles, and we are able to outpace adversaries, especially when adversaries are at a scale which is much larger than any individual nation. We strengthen collective deterrence when we work together. If European defense budgets align around common priorities, we are able to unlock economies at scale unmatched by fragmented national programs. We have the industrial base. What we need now is to synchronize, is to have the will to synchronize and to act as one. The third pillar is digital sovereignty and resilience. Strategic autonomy requires actually securing infrastructure and Europe's digital backbone. It is the foundation of operational readiness. We must eliminate single points of failure, especially in technology segments where adversaries have disproportionate leverage. We must prioritize cybersecurity by design and lead in cybersecurity solutions to protect critical infrastructure and defense network. We must invest in sovereign cloud capabilities, in trusted microelectronics and semiconductors for defense systems, in resilient communication networks, and in resilient supply chains. So it's a global, from top to bottom or from bottom to top, it's a global approach we need. Europe must also shape norms and standards, not simply adapt those set by others. This is the only way to make our own choices and to shape the world based on our interests and values. Of course, this might sound like a dream, but actually, the question is, we have European digital champions, or we have to support European digital champions, and we have to limit the influence of foreign companies, because this is the only way not to have protectionist strategies, but to emphasize building our strength together in order to achieve what we need for our deterrence and defense. So, in order to make things a little more concrete and to turn ambition into a reality, we must align political will with investment reality, we must build pan-European innovation networks, and finally, we must promote standardization and interoperability. This is important. This can be done by developing platforms that operate seamlessly across borders. From a military perspective, it's necessary, it's critical actually, and this is actually one of the main drivers for NATO, for the alliance. We must adopt common cybersecurity standards. This is important and critical for civilian, but also for military usage. And we must lead globally on responsible artificial intelligence and autonomous systems, both in doctrine, in code, in product, and in systems.
Yeah, so there is a lot that can be done in order to keep up with the changes. Dr. Gille, what are the main field of cyber adventures, actions and way forwards that you have identified, and at what scale can partnership and international cooperation can feed into that?
Yes, well, we try to create different fields of action, and each program that we feel is worth launching and like putting lots of taxpayer money into must fit into at least one of these different fields of action. First one, and very important for us, is like further development of German fields of excellence. We could call this also the Asterix approach. So maybe the technological race might seem lost in many respects. We have to ask ourselves the question, is the whole race, is it lost? Maybe no. Maybe there are still small pockets where we should proffer our capabilities and where we should like invest steadily in order to build an advantage. One of these areas of resistance, if you might call them, might be the technology of brain computing interfaces with pretty strong medical research backbone in Germany, and because of this, we are one of the world leaders in like detecting EEG brain signals and putting them into intelligence and trying to steer intelligent algorithms with these signals. So with our funding, we try to keep us and European partners in the race in these specific fields, for example. Second area of action for us is to shed new lights into I would say hidden corners of fundamental key technologies like quantum computing, for example, which of course might be very, very important in the mid to long term, because it might fundamentally alter the way computation is being conducted. It might, in a positive sense, elevate Moore's law to a new level of computing power, but also in a negative point of view, it might basically render all our cryptological efforts to this date useless. So I think we cannot fall behind in this area, and one of the main projects we have started here is a mobile quantum computer, still in very early stages, but the idea is we need quantum computers that have a certain level of resilience against shocks that don't have to be cooled down to the absolute 0 degree Kelvin point, that can be carried around from one place to another. So I think this is a really important task for us. Third perspective, of course, there are many technologies where we have to work with basic building blocks that come from different parts of the world and where we are not 100% sovereign, at least not at this point. For example, one could argue that the race for cloud computing is basically lost, at least in the midterm. It's not realistic that European competitors will have the same service such as AWS and Oracle, but so we have to decide how we can work with these technologies in a sovereign way. One tool for doing so might be fully homomorphic encryption, which enables a cloud to compute data without actually seeing the data. So the complete computation of data is being conducted in a encrypted manner, and the cloud never sees, the cloud provider never sees the actual data. For example, machine learning algorithms can be done in this way. So we think this is a very important technology. Another example would be the one I already mentioned, like we need to establish very holistic and deep drilling mechanisms, benchmarks that can evaluate foundation models that have been pre-trained with immense computing power in the US or in China or whatever, in order to see what they really are doing. I mean, we have some promising approaches. We have Mistral in France, for example. But we also need to be realistic about our midterm capabilities of producing frontier models that are really at the forefront of what is technological possible. First, the fourth and last perspective is, of course, we have to reduce technological dependencies in the supply chain. And I think, in my opinion, French President Macron was right when he called on all the EU member states to reinforce our sovereignty, because we have to reduce current dependencies in supply chain. It's very crucial, and we need to be more direct in this perspective. And we address these challenges in multiple programs. For example, we think there's a genuine need for having more homegrown identification mechanisms in Europe, not just being reliant on Face ID or other mechanisms. So we are investing, for example, in a program of using new and very innovative biometrical methods of identifying and authentifying, because we think that dependency should be reduced significantly in this area. But for all these technologies, of course, there are very complicated interdependencies. We have different types of know-how, pre-products. We have relationships within Europe. So we, as middle powers, to quote Mark Carney, as Germany, etc., cannot perform the upscaling and the reduction of supply chain dependencies alone. We need international partnerships, especially within Europe, to do so. And in order to make this vision reality, we see several ways of collaboration and that we are trying to actively deploy. First of all, it's very important to know that basically every entity in the European Union and NATO, be it universities, research institutions, startups, large corporations with big research and development department can all apply for our programs. We are not just limited on Germany. We want to start and initiate research programs that are for the benefit of the whole of the EU and NATO. And of course, we try to disseminate this information and try to encourage players from all over EU and NATO to participate in our programs. Furthermore, we try to share information on national ecosystems that we have collected through our startup landscapes in order to see where are really spots that are worthwhile for investing. And for the future, but this is very early stage still, we try to conduct more joint projects in order to coordinate our capability development with our partners from a very early stage. Because remember, we are in it for the very long haul because our mission is to develop deep tech in very low technology readiness levels. So we're talking TRL 1 to 4 or maybe 5 here. So we have to plan these sort of capability developments and projects very far ahead.
So we are approaching the question and answer session, but before we get into that, I would like to let the two of you conclude. First, Major General Luzeaux, what direction should Europe and its industry sector follow, in your opinion?
This is a very good question. So, the defense industry is, of course, the strategic amplifier, and the choice we make today in research and development, partnerships, investments, will define Europe's technological sovereignty or autonomy for decades. So what we need is really to ensure that our security is ensured by the capabilities, by some capabilities we control. We have to ensure that our strategic choices are free from external constraints, and of course that our values are embedded in the technologies that protect us. So Europe should innovate with purpose, collaborate with resolve, and lead with confidence. In order to do this, we have to identify critical technologies and dependencies by considering the whole life cycle from research, development to production. As was said this morning by Sakti, by the Supreme Allied Commander for NATO, and also by the President of the Military Committee for EU, we need vision and implementation. Not just one, not just the other, both together. So as a final conclusion, I would say history will remember this era not for the challenges we face, but for the choices we make. And we have to build a Europe that doesn't wait for technology to arrive, but invents it, deploys it, and secures it. We have to develop our national centers of excellence, and together, government, militaries, industry, we can transform Europe into a global leader in defense technology, working on resilience and autonomy. And I would finally conclude by make Europe great again.
Thank you. And to conclude, Dr. Gille, what orientation would you recommend European countries to take in the digital sector?
Well, I think we have to simply get ahead of the wave. I mean, we probably have lost several technological races. I mean, I don't want it to sound too fatalistic here, but if you look at cloud computing and probably AI in the midterm, I think there are other parts of the world that are at the forefront. And of course, I think we have to try to catch up in the mid to long term in these areas and have to invest. But I also think there are other technologies that will maybe shape the day after tomorrow even more than these technologies. And I think this is where we have to invest heavily. I think, for example, about brain computing interfaces, about quantum computing, about homomorphic encryption and many other highly specialized and highly complicated technologies. And I think there are other races that could be won. And I think we as Europe should focus also on these highly innovative technologies and fuse our forces in order to succeed.
Thanks to the both of you. We will now open the question and answer session.